today we are making pie dough and pie crust. I'm going to show you how to make flaky perfect pie dough step by step, sharing what to do and what not to do. So let's get started. Today we're gonna use those 6 ingredients: all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, salt, unsalted butter, oil. Today I'm using olive oil, but you can use any other regular oil like canola oil or vegetable oil, and ice water. So I personally start from preparing ice water. I just dump ice in a cup of water, and by the time I'm done with preparing other ingredients, it is still very cold, but the ice is melted. So I don't need to strain the ice. It's just a tiny thing, but I like this way. So before we go further, let me talk about the most crucial point to make successful pie dough or pie crust. So for me, or for many of you, the successful pie crust equals the flakiness, the delicate flaky texture. Butter plays a huge role for this texture. Specifically, pieces of butter do the job to create the flaky texture. When your butter gets soft and pasted into the dough, the texture will not be flaky because butter and flour are blended together. So to make flaky pie crust, we need to keep butter cold so that it will not get blended into the dough and it can remain as pieces. I want you to keep that in mind and watch how I do it after this. So let's cut cold butter into very small pieces. By cutting so small like this, you do not need to take time cutting it later after adding into flours, which really helps to keep butter cold. And another thing I do to really keep it cold is to freeze this butter until right before use. That really helps to keep them remain as pieces as you mix later. So today I'll do all by hand, but I personally recommend to use a food processor if you have, because it is simply faster. The machine will do all the job to cut the butter into small pieces. You can cut the butter into much bigger pieces like that and let the machine do the job. And then I move into preparing all the dried ingredients. So to keep butter cold, I like to chill all-purpose flour until right before use as well. I personally use a freezer. Add sugar, add salt. Over here, you can add shredded cheese, herb, pepper, and other spices and enjoy all the different flavors. I personally like to add cheddar. It gives nice flavors that matches with sweet pies also, like apple pies, which is my favorite. Add the chilled butter. And we're gonna cut into even smaller pieces. Today, I'm using a pastry blender like this. Push down all the way and cut all over evenly. When you see that it is almost done, stop and check. Big ones shouldn't be bigger than about 5mm. This is too big for me, so I just split in half by hands. It's totally okay that all the pieces are not completely same sizes. Toss around and check if there's any bigger pieces. And now ice is just melted and the water is still very cold. Today we are adding 120 grams of water, but I set aside about 2 teaspoons to add toward the end. So I'm scaling 110 grams right now and add oil in it and pour on flours all over. So it might be surprising, but adding a bit of oil is my secret. By adding oil, it gets blended with flour. So the bond of water and flour gets kind of weakened, and that creates such a light, even more flaky texture. But the key is not adding it too much. Today we are adding 2 tablespoons. After adding water, what's important is not to knead the dough, or specifically not to knead the butter. So watch how I do it. First, our goal here is not to let them stick as a dough. The first goal is to spread the moisture all over the flour. There are some parts that flour soaked up more water than others. So what I am doing here is loving the surface to let them break down and spread all over more evenly. Keep flipping and do it all over so that you do not miss a spot. When you do this part with the hand, the butter gets warm up faster, so I like to use a spatula. Today I'm showing all without cutting the footage until it becomes one ball, because this is the part most people fail. We knead too much or touch too much and butter gets pasted. So keep watching this whole process. When you feel the moisture is kind of all over and there's no huge chunks of wet flour, now we move into our next task, which is to let them stick together and form a ball. So push it down like that all over and flip. Find the dried powdery part and spread on the wet part evenly and push down. Simply repeat this and flour will soak up the moisture more evenly each time. Now you can still see all the dry flowers, but it's definitely less, and overall the texture looks slightly more moist. And now I'm adding the 2 teaspoons of water that I was setting aside. You can add 2 teaspoons all at once, but I like to add 1 teaspoon at a time. And again, keep repeating the same motion. Flip and find a dry spot and let it touch with a wet spot and press down. I use a hand for this part, but when your hands are very warm, I recommend to use a dough scraper instead, or wearing gloves like this really helps to keep butter cold. The key is not to press the same spot over and over because then butter will start melting. When you feel the butter is actually start getting softened for some reasons, you can put it back in the fridge or freezer for some minutes and come back. I know it's easier to add more water to form a ball, but we should not do that because the crust gets hard and too crispy when you add more water. You can still see layers of crust thanks to the butter, but the texture will be harder because more gluteins get formed with more water. It'll slowly get more moist and they start to stick together, so keep paying attention here. You do not want to take too much time here since the butter starts getting softened slowly, so do it as fast as you can like this once you get used to the move. Stop slightly before it is moist all over. That is okay even if you still see small pieces of dried flour here and there like that, as long as they stick together to form a ball. One batch of this recipe is enough for about 2 10-inch pie plates, so I like to cut it in half and wrap separately. This is also enough for 1 10-inch apple pie. Place the dough on a plastic wrap. Place like that to make it flat a little bit more, and fold the plastic wrap like this, creating a slightly bigger square than the dough. And roll like that to make it nice and even thickness, and form a round shape like that beforehand so that it'll be easier to roll the dough and create big circle for my pie plate later. I also pinch the edge all over and make sure there is no cracks at this point like this so that it'll start cracking less as I roll later. And chill in the fridge for at least 1 hour until the butter gets cold completely, but ideally more than a few hours or even overnight so that the moisture inside the flour spread more evenly, and that make it easier for you to roll with less cracks on the edge. When you do not have a pastry blade and want to use a dough scraper like this, it takes for a long time to cut butter, so here is what you could do. Take some all-purpose flour that is already scaled for the pie dough and coat all over the butter and dice them into very small pieces. By dusting flour, you can dice butter very easily without sticky situation. Make sure the pieces are not bigger than about 5 mm. By cutting like this already, you do not have to cut any more after adding into the flour. Just pour water and oil and mix exactly how I showed earlier. To roll the dough, dust some flour on the working surface and all over the dough, but not too much, because when you dust too much flours, the dough can soak up more flours and it makes the texture more crunchy. Pinch the edge like that every time you see some cracks before they crack too much to fix. Every time I roll straight, I turn 45 degrees and roll straight again, like this. By repeating this, you can make a nice circle shape. And every time you turn, make sure there is enough flours on the working surface so that the dough will not stick, so as the surface of the dough so that your rolling pin will not stick. cool down the room temperature if you can, and try to roll as fast as possible. I know it's difficult at the beginnings, but you get used to it after some practices. Roll until it's spread to the ideal size. I roll into a bigger size than the pie plate and dot some flour on the bottom of the pie plate and the back of your pie dough. By doing this, your pie slice comes off more easily after being baked. I fold the dough in half and open up on top of a plate. Make sure the dough is on the very center here and let the dough sink in the plate. I take the edge like this and push inside to really make sure it's dropped to the corner edge. When the dough is not dropped all the way to the corner, the side will drop and shrink as you bake. And now make sure the side is fit nicely and not loose, and the thickness is same all over. The dough is dropped to the corner all the way right here, and now fold the edge like this to create more clean look. If the batter is sticking to your fingers and difficult to work on, dot some flowers on the surface like this and it will not be sticky anymore. Now pinch the edge like this. Pinch with good pressure to create a very sharp, good looking edge. You can leave like that and finish, or make some patterns by pushing the edge by a fork or whatever you want to use. Now I'll show you how to make a waffle pattern using fingers. By the way, I use bread flour to dust on the working surface. Compared to the cake flour or all-purpose flour, bread flour sticks less to the dough and gets soaked in a little bit less. I usually chill the flour in the freezer until right before I use to keep it cold, and when I see there is some parts longer than others, I usually tear some off and add to the part that is shorter than others before I fold the edge. And pinch like that, also like how I did earlier, and using your fingers push in the edge like that to create waffles. You can make bigger or even smaller waffles as you like. And now we chill this dough completely in the fridge until right before baking. And this is very, very important. If you don't chill it here, your dough shrink and slide down as you bake. And not only it does not look beautiful, but also the butter is too soft and the crust will not be as flaky as it should. I usually put it in the freezer. By chilling until right before you bake, your crust get more flaky and it'll hold the shape a lot more. So it's so important. And now I'm showing how to set in smaller pans with a few different edge patterns. Let the dough sink in the pan and make sure that the corner edge and the side is completely fit in, just like how I did with the big plates. For this one, I cut off the edge like that with a knife to create a flat edge. It's an easy way. With this second one, I'll create a taller edge. Attach some flowers on your fingers like this when you feel it's too sticky, and if needed, trim the edge with a scissor to create the same lengths, and pinch the edge like this. And here is a top ring. I'll show more elastic look with this one. Cut the edge like this with a scissor randomly and open up. You can make it longer and create more dramatic look if you like. Today I used small beans as a weight for blind baking, but you can use rice, stones, or anything else that can be safe to bake. So that parchment paper fits very well to the dough. I make it wrinkly like this and lay on top of a chilled dough. I just took out the plate from a freezer, and do not hesitate to pour a lot of beans like this for it to do the best job. The beans help avoiding the crust from shrinking as you bake. I baked with 400 Fahrenheit right away until the edge get toasted rightly, which usually takes about 17 to 22 minutes depending on the size. For small sizes, do the exactly same way, just smaller sizes with smaller portions. So some recipes require you to brine bake beforehand and pour the filling and bake, such as some quiche or cheesecake recipes, or don't bake the dough at all and pour the filling and bake, such as some apple pies recipe, or bake the crust all the way until it gets crispy and pour the finished filling like chocolate ganache or custard cream. It all depends on the recipe and what kind of filling goes in. So about the temperature and the time, you can follow the recipe you are using for your pie and change around accordingly. But when you want to bake all the way until it gets crispy, turn the temperature down to 350 Fahrenheit after brine baking, and I usually let the crust cool down before I bake again to avoid it from shrinking a lot. And make some holes on the bottom like that to avoid it from puffing up and shrinking while it's being baked. Bake for about 20 to 25 minutes until it becomes nice golden brown all over. If the poking was not enough and the bottom started rising like this too much, which happens sometimes especially for bigger plates, simply take it out and poke some more and put it back. Don't hesitate to bake very well to create light crispy texture and not soft texture unless that's what you like. Using the pie dough, I baked the apple pies, mini quiche, chocolate pecan pies, and mini apple crumbles. Pies bring happiness to all. Bon appetit! Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope your friends and family will enjoy your delicious pie. If you made it at home, leave me a comment to let me know how it went, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!